Welcome, forest friends. It's time to enter the forest and see what we discover. Open your mind and wander with us for a bit. Welcome back, forest friends. By now you've walked many paths with us. You've seen how schema form and retract, how memory strengthens trails, how co-regulation calms the emotional weather, how stories shape identity, how inner language guides effort, and how mental simulation allows the mind to rehearse before action. Today we arrive at a question that sits quietly beneath all of learning but determines whether it truly matters. This episode is called When the Trail Leaves the Forest: Transfer, Adaptation, and Learning That Travels. At its heart, learning is not meant to stay where it began. If knowledge only works in the room where it was taught, on the worksheet where it was practiced, or in the test where it was measured, it is not yet learning. It is familiarity. True learning travels. It crosses contexts, it adapts, it follows the learner into new terrain. Transfer is what happens when a learner takes an idea learned in one place and uses it somewhere else. That sounds simple. In reality, it is one of the hardest things the human mind does. Cognitive scientists like Perkins, Salomon, Bransford, and Schwartz have shown that transfer does not happen automatically. The brain does not assume that a strategy learned in one context applies to another unless it is explicitly helped to see the connection. This is where schema returned to the center of the forest. Transfer does not occur through facts, it occurs through schema. When a learner builds a schema that captures the deep structure of an idea, not just its surface features, that schema becomes portable. Its frills extend beyond the original context. It can dock with new situations. Without schema, learning stays trapped where it was formed. Think of a student who learns how to solve a specific type of math problem. If their understanding is tied only to the numbers on the page, transfer fails. But if they understand the underlying structure of proportional reasoning, that schema can travel into science, economics, cooking, or real-world decision-making. The trail leaves the forest and enters new landscapes. One reason transfer fails so often is that learners are rarely taught to look for it. They are taught to complete tasks, not to extract meaning. They are taught procedures, not patterns. And without pattern recognition, the mind cannot recognize when an old trail might help in a new place. Transfer also depends on emotional safety. When a learner feels uncertain, their nervous system narrows attention. They default to familiar routines even when those routines no longer fit. This is not laziness, it is protection. To attempt transfer, a learner must risk being wrong in a new context. That risk requires psychological safety. This is why co-regulation still matters here. A calm adult presence gives the learner permission to try an old idea in a new way. When an educator says, "This reminds me of something we've done before," they are not giving an answer. They are opening a bridge. When a parent says, "Where have you seen something like this?" they are inviting the mind to travel. Transfer also relies on language. The way we talk about learning determines whether learners see ideas as isolated or connected. When adults name schemas explicitly, when they say things like, "This is another example of systems," or "This is the same pattern we saw earlier," they help learners tag experiences with transferable meaning. Over time, the learner begins asking those questions internally. The inner narrator becomes a guide, scanning for familiar structures in unfamiliar places. Mental simulation plays a role here as well. Before transfer happens, the learner often imagines whether an idea might work. They simulate applying an old strategy to a new problem. If that simulation feels too risky, the attempt never occurs. But when learners are taught to imagine adaptation instead of perfection, transfer becomes more likely. The mind practices flexibility before the body acts. There is also a critical distinction between near transfer and far transfer. Near transfer occurs when contexts are very similar. Far transfer occurs when contexts look different on the surface but share deep structure. Far transfer is where education often claims success but rarely delivers it. The reason is simple. Far transfer requires strong, flexible schema and explicit comparison across contexts. When learners are guided to compare examples, to ask what stays the same and what changes, schema frills strengthen and extend. The forest develops cross paths. A learner begins to recognize structure instead of surface. This is why comparison, analogies, and multiple representations are so powerful. They teach the mind how to travel. Leaders play a role here too. Schools that silo learning by subject, schedule, or role make transfer harder. Systems that create coherence across experiences make transfer more likely. When educators share language, frameworks, and values, learners encounter the same schema repeatedly in different contexts. The forest becomes interconnected instead of fragmented. As we step back, transfer reveals itself not as a separate skill, but as the outcome of everything we've explored so far. Schema provide the structure. Memory preserves the trail. Narrative identity determines whether the learner believes they are capable of adaptation. Self-talk guides risk-taking. Mental simulation rehearses application. Co-regulation provides safety. When these elements align, learning travels. When they do not, learning stays stuck. As we close today's walk, consider this truth. Education succeeds not when students can repeat what they were taught, but when they recognize when to use it. Transfer is the moment learning leaves the classroom and enters life. It is the trail that continues beyond the forest edge. In our next episode, Forest Friend, we will explore how habits and automaticity form when transferred, learning is used repeatedly, and how the brain decides which trails become the default paths it walks without thinking. Until then, remember that the goal of learning is not mastery in place, but movement across landscapes. Knowledge matters most when it knows how to travel. We'll see you on the next trail. Thanks for joining us on the Intellectual Hike, Forest Friends. Don't forget to visit us at www.alderbranch.org for more free resources and join our friends today. See you for another brain hiking adventure soon.